The CIA announced today that the long-rumored psychic spy program, Project...
Picture a secret U.S. military program where the spies didn't rely on guns, gadgets, or even satellites. Instead, their missions took them into the uncharted territory of the human mind. Their job was to see enemy secrets, thousands of miles away, predict disasters, and maybe even explore other planets. All with the power of thought. It sounds like a Hollywood sci-fi. But for nearly 2 decades, from the peak of the Cold War to the dawn of the internet, this was a classified, funded, and very real operation for the United States government. For years, the files were sealed and the stories were brushed off as conspiracy theories. But when the CIA began releasing its archives, were part of a massive declassification of millions of records. The truth about Project Stargate started coming out. It was a program born from paranoia, fueled by a high-stakes arms race, and staffed by a small, strange team of people who claimed to have extraordinary abilities. These weren't just spies, they were psychic spies. Their story is one of the most bizarre chapters in military intelligence. A journey into the unbelievable that makes you question the very limits of human consciousness. Tonight, we're opening those declassified files to explore the strange experiments, the high-stakes missions, and the wild claims of the men and women who stared at maps and somehow saw the impossible.
This reeks of black budget funding, funneling into something way more darker.
For once, I agree with you on that. A physics spy program could be an effective front for something much darker, like assassination.
What the hell are you talking about? I mean, like the fact that they secretly replaced all birds with surveillance drones. Every single bird. Not real. Surveillance drones are expensive.
I'm pretty sure birds are real.
Whatever. You gotta tell yourself to sleep at night, buddy.
For years, these files were sealed. The stories were brushed off as conspiracy theories, but when the CIA began releasing its archives, part of a massive declassification of millions of records, the truth about Project Stargate started coming out. It was a program born from paranoia, fueled by a high-stakes arms race, and staffed by a small, strange team of people. People who claimed to have extraordinary abilities. These weren't just spies. They had psychic abilities. Their story is one of the most bizarre chapters in military intelligence. A journey into the unbelievable that makes you question the very limits of human consciousness. Tonight, we're opening those declassified files to explore the strange experiments, the high-stakes missions, and the wild claims of the men and women who stared at maps and somehow saw the impossible.
I can do the same thing. All I need are some shrooms and some Pink Floyd playing in the background. I wish you were here.
Whoa, easy there. We don't want a copyright strike. Let's keep the music AI generated. Now, if we can continue. In 1979, a top-secret Soviet spy plane, a Tupolev Tu-22 bomber, crashed somewhere in the dense jungles of Zaire, Africa. For the CIA, this was an intelligence goldmine. The plane held advanced Soviet tech that American engineers were dying to get their hands on. Just one problem: Africa is huge, and the jungle canopy is an almost perfect shield from above. The CIA's multi-million-dollar spy satellites were completely blind. Weeks went by, the trail went cold, and frustration mounted. Out of options, intelligence officials turned to a deeply unconventional source. She wasn't a spy or a pilot. She was an administrative assistant from Ohio named Rosemary Smith. Thousands of miles away, in a secure room at Fort Meade, Maryland, Smith was given a map of the region. She closed her eyes, entered a trance-like state, and pointed to a single, unassuming spot. She said she could see it. Technicians, probably shaking their heads, turned her finger point into a set of geographical coordinates and sent them to the CIA station chief in Zaire. A search party was dispatched. A few days later, a call came in. they'd found the wreckage of the Soviet bomber, right where the psychic said it would be. This story is one of the program's most famous legends. And while it's not officially confirmed in the declassified documents, it perfectly captures the promise of one of the most bizarre and controversial programs in U.S. history, Project Stargate. To understand how the world's most powerful military ended up investing millions in psychics, you have to remember the suffocating paranoia of the Cold War. This wasn't just a battle of armies. It was a war of technology and secrets. The space race was on. The nuclear arms race held the world hostage. And behind the Iron Curtain, U.S. intelligence started hearing whispers of a new, even stranger competition, a psychic arms race. Throughout the 1970s, reports trickled into the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, suggesting the Soviet Union was pouring huge resources into psychotronics. The rumors claimed they were studying everything from telepathy and clairvoyance to mind control. According to CIA intelligence briefs, the Soviets were supposedly spending as much as 60 million rubles a year on this research, a figure that some sources claimed later ballooned to 300 million. While these numbers were never confirmed, the fear they generated in Washington was very real. Declassified memos show a genuine concern about a psychic gap. One report noted with alarm that the Soviets seemed to be far ahead, having likely completed more of the critical experiments needed to weaponize these abilities. Could a Soviet psychic read the president's mind, disable a nuclear silo with a thought, mentally track American submarines? The questions were outlandish, but in the Cold War, no threat could be dismissed. If the Soviets were doing it, America had to do it too. As Congressman Charlie Rose put it to a House Intelligence Committee, "If the Russians have it and we don't, we're in serious trouble." He even joked that a working psychic program seemed like a hell of a cheap radar system. And so, driven by this fear, the decision was made. In 1972, the CIA quietly funded a new, highly classified program to see if psychic phenomena could be used for intelligence gathering. The early work was handed off to the Stanford Research Institute, or SRI, a research group in California that had become independent from the university in 1970. The program operated under a confusing jumble of code names over the years: Scan 8, Gondola Wish, Grill Flame, to name a few. It wasn't until 1991 that all these efforts were rolled into one: Project Stargate. The mission was simple, yet profound. Find out if the human mind could become America's next great weapon. At the heart of Project Stargate was one core idea: remote viewing. The term was coined by the lead researchers at SRI, a pair of laser physicists named Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ. They defined it as the ability to psychically see or get information about a distant target using only your mind. It was basically a modern, scientific-sounding label for clairvoyance. But Puthoff and Targ were determined to study it not as some mystical art, but as a repeatable scientific process. Their lab at SRI in Menlo Park, California, became ground zero for this strange new science. They tried to create strict experiments to test and control the ability. In a typical early test, a sender would drive to a randomly selected location somewhere in the Bay Area. Back at the lab, the viewer would sit in a sealed, shielded room. Often, a Faraday cage designed to block all electromagnetic signals to make sure no cheating was possible. At a set time, the viewer would be asked to describe or sketch what they saw. Afterward, an independent panel of judges would get the psychic's drawings and a list of 5 possible locations. They'd visit each site and rank how well the description matched, trying to get an objective score. The goal was to strip away the theatrics of fortune-telling. and to treat the phenomenon like a raw signal that could be analyzed and improved. The viewers themselves weren't crystal ball gazers. The program recruited everyone from decorated military veterans to housewives, believing the ability might be a hidden talent in all of us. Eventually, the military set up its own small operational unit at Fort Meade, Maryland, led by men like Lieutenant Frederick Skip Atwater. This team of about 15 to 20 people worked out of what he called an old, leaky wooden barracks. Over the years, they developed three main methods. The first was coordinate remote viewing (CRV), where a viewer was given nothing but a set of geographic coordinates and told to describe what was there. The second, extended remote viewing (ERV), used relaxation techniques to help the viewer enter an altered state of consciousness, hoping to make them more receptive. A third, more controversial method was written remote viewing (WRV), which involved a kind of automatic writing and was considered far less reliable. Proponents like Puthoff and Targ claimed that their best viewers eventually hit a 65% accuracy rate. The threshold their intelligence clients demanded. They thought they were on the verge of a breakthrough. But from day one, critics were loud. Skeptics pointed to major flaws in the experiments. The potential for sensory leakage and unconscious cues from the researchers. Was this a real phenomenon? Or were the scientists eager to believe just fooling themselves? That question would hang over the project for its entire existence. The story of Stargate is really the story of its people. The handful of individuals who became the government's psychic spies. They were a strange bunch, each with their own style and a list of alleged successes. First, there was Ingo Swann, a flamboyant New York artist and a key figure in the program's creation. Swann wasn't just a test subject. He helped Puthoff and Targ develop the very methods for remote viewing. His most audacious claim came in 1973, when researchers at SRI gave him coordinates for the planet Jupiter. In the session that followed, Swann described the gas giant, but added something bizarre, a faint ring similar to Saturn's. At the time, science hadn't confirmed this. But 6 years later, in 1979, NASA's Voyager 1 probe flew by Jupiter and sent back the first ever images of its thin ring system. Was it a 1 in a billion guess? Or had Ingo Swann's mind really traveled 500 million miles to see something our best telescopes had missed? The event remains a legendary yet highly controversial part of the Stargate lore. Then there was Pat Price, a retired police commissioner, who was considered one of SRI's psychic treasures. His most famous session was in 1974, when the CIA asked him to view a top-secret Soviet site at Semipalatinsk, giving him only the coordinates. Price started describing and sketching what he saw. Underground buildings and, most amazingly, a massive gantry crane that moved on rails over a large structure. The details were so specific that when the CIA later compared his drawings to their own spy satellite photos, they were floored. The crane was there, just as he described it. But Price's story took a weirder turn. He also claimed to have found 4 secret underground alien bases on Earth, claims that are not supported by any official records. His mysterious death in 1975 only deepened the enigma surrounding him. Perhaps the most famous of all the psychic spies was Joseph McMoneagle, a decorated Army veteran known as Remote Viewer Number 1. Recruited in 1978 after a near-death experience he believed unlocked his abilities. McMoneagle was the consummate soldier, disciplined, methodical, and by all accounts, effective. He claimed to have worked on hundreds of missions, locating hostages, tracking criminals, and finding downed aircraft. He famously predicted where Skylab would crash in the Australian desert and provided detailed descriptions of a new massive Soviet submarine class, later verified by other intelligence. For his work, McMoneagle was awarded the Legion of Merit, one of the military's highest honors, making him possibly the only soldier ever decorated for psychic spying. Yet even McMoneagle admitted the ability was wildly inconsistent, once saying that 98% of the people who claim to be psychic are kooks. And finally, there was the most polarizing figure to ever touch the program, Uri Geller. Already a global celebrity for his televised spoon-bending, Israeli performer was brought to SRI for testing in 1973, in controlled experiments. Geller was asked to reproduce drawings sealed in opaque envelopes. According to the researchers' reports, his results were remarkable, but his involvement also brought intense criticism. The famous magician and debunker, James Randi, called Geller a fraud, arguing he could replicate all of Geller's feats with simple stage magic. Another evaluator, psychology professor Ray Hyman, concluded that Geller was a fraud and that the physicists running the test had missed his tricks. Was Uri Geller a genuine psychic who convinced the CIA, or a clever showman who fooled a couple of hopeful scientists? The debate still rages and gets to the heart of Project Stargate, the razor-thin line between a real phenomenon and a clever illusion.
Geller bent my cousin Spork at a bar mitzvah in '78. The man's a legend. That guy was just jealous. Geller had better hair. It's always the hair.
Your cousin Spork is not a primary source, and we're not talking about hair. While Stargate spent a lot of time in the lab, the unit at Fort Meade was an operational intelligence asset. They were given real-world missions, often when every other method had failed. These weren't tests. They were high-stakes operations involving national security and human lives. One of the most dramatic cases was the 1981 kidnapping of U.S. Army Brigadier General James Dozier in Verona, Italy. By the Red Brigade's terrorist group, a frantic international manhunt was launched. But the terrorists were pros, and NATO intelligence hit a wall. Weeks passed with no sign of the general. Desperate, the U.S. turned to Stargate. The mission fell to the program star Joe McManigal. Working from Maryland with just a map of Italy, McManigal began describing a location. He reported a multi-story stone or brick building in the town of Padua, near a river. Inside, he saw the general being held in a small, soundproofed room. Maybe a tent pitched inside a larger room, loud music playing to disorient him. The intel was passed to Italian authorities, who were skeptical. 42 days after the kidnapping, Italian anti-terrorism forces acting on their own intelligence stormed an apartment in Padua. There they found General Dozier alive. He was chained to a cot inside a tent set up in a room, with loud music blasting. While conventional intelligence officially gets the credit for the rescue, the details were uncannily similar to what McManigal had described weeks earlier. The Stargate viewers were pointed at plenty of other targets. They were asked to find Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi before the 1986 U.S. bombing of Tripoli. One viewer correctly identified Gaddafi's location, but also predicted he would be gone by the time the bombs fell, which turned out to be true. They were tasked with hunting for plutonium in North Korea and describing new Soviet submarines. But for every stunning story like the Dozier case, there were clear failures. The data was often vague, ambiguous, or just plain wrong. A viewer tasked with describing a Soviet airfield got some minor details right, but missed the big picture entirely. In 1994, psychics failed to find any evidence of plutonium in North Korea. This inconsistency was the program's fatal flaw. Intelligence agencies run on reliable data. A source that's only right some of the time, and you don't know which time, is operationally almost useless. For the generals who had to make life or death decisions, it was a gamble they were becoming less and less willing to take.
This is a matter of national security. Project Stargate must be investigated fully.
I stand before you today not just as a congressman, but as a concerned citizen of this great nation.
For nearly 2 decades, Project Stargate operated in the shadows, a multi-million-dollar bet on the paranormal. It survived different presidents, budgets, and a ton of internal skepticism, mostly because of the lingering fear of a Soviet psychic threat and the occasional tantalizing success that kept hope alive. But by the early 1990s, the world had changed. The Soviet Union was gone, the Cold War was over, and the psychic gap that justified the program had vanished with the Berlin Wall. The program now faced more scrutiny than ever. In 1995, Congress ordered the CIA to take control of Stargate and conduct a final, independent evaluation. The end was near. The CIA hired the American Institutes for Research Air to write Stargate's official autopsy. Air appointed to academics with completely opposite views to lead the review. Jessica Utz, statistics professor, and Ray Hyman, the same psychologist and skeptic who had called Uri Geller a fraud 20 years earlier. Their conclusions perfectly captured the program's bizarre, contradictory nature. Professor Utz looked purely at the lab data and concluded that the results were statistically significant. She argued that remote viewers were performing well above chance, and something real was happening that defied conventional explanation. Professor Hyman, on the other hand, argued that even if the stats were interesting, they were operationally useless. He found no evidence that the program had ever provided actionable intelligence that led to a concrete success. The information was consistently vague, unreliable, and often wrong. He saw a history of wishful thinking, not a proven intelligence tool. The final Air report sided with the skeptic. It concluded that remote viewing had not been proven to work in a way that was valuable for intelligence operations, and recommended that the program be shut down. In November 1995, the CIA officially terminated Project Stargate. After more than 20 years and an estimated cost of around $20 million, America's experiment with psychic spies was over. The leaky barracks at Fort Meade were cleared out, the remote viewers were sent home, and the files were buried in the CIA's archives. So what do we make of Project Stargate? Is it a secret breakthrough into the untapped power of the human mind? Or a costly, 2-decade-long wild goose chase born from Cold War paranoia? The declassified documents don't really give us a clean answer. The evidence for something happening is weirdly compelling. The statistical results from the lab, the eerie details in the Dozier kidnapping. Pat Price's shockingly accurate sketches of a secret Soviet base. These events are all documented in official government files. Suggests something was going on that we ain't fully understand, and yet the program was an operational failure. It never became a reliable intelligence-gathering tool. For every hit, there were countless misses. The final official report concluded it was of no value and shut it down. In the end, Project Stargate is a paradox. It failed as a spy program, but it may have succeeded as a bizarre scientific experiment that stumbled upon a genuine, weak and unreliable human ability.
That's what they want you to think. They didn't shut it down. They just moved it to a deeper, darker budget. You don't think the government really pays $1 million for a toilet seat? Do ya? No. That money is going to fund replacing all live birds with disguised surveillance drones.
Not everything is a conspiracy. It's a story about a time when fear and curiosity pushed the government to explore every strange possibility in the name of national security. It's a chapter of history where military intelligence and the paranormal collided, leaving us with a legacy of fascinating questions. Was it a colossal waste of money, or a top-secret glimpse into the true power of the human mind? Let us know what you think in the comments. The story of Stargate proves that sometimes the truth hidden in declassified files really is stranger than fiction. If you want to explore more government secrets and weird history, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories they didn't want you to know. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Stay curious, and as always, stay skeptical. We'll see you in the next one.
Turn the page, let the whispers flow. Stories deep where the shadows go. Cryptic tales under moonlight's glow. Drift away where the legends grow. Yawn, Chronicles, whispers to the night. History fades in the soft twilight. Close your eyes, let the tales ignite. Dreams will guide you till morning light. Where the secrets hide, in the stillness where the stars collide. 2 hours gone on this sleepy ride. Feel the calm on the dreamer's tide. Yawn, Chronicles, whispers to the night. History fades in the soft twilight. Close your eyes, let the tales ignite. Dreams will guide you till morning light. As the echoes of the past unwind, leave the chaos of the day behind. In the quiet every truth you'll find. Sleepy shadows of the ancient kind. Chronicles, whispers to the night. History fades in the soft twilight. Close your eyes, let the tales ignite. Dreams will guide you till morning light.